A man's boots hit the tile floor hard. His arms were full, 60 pounds of trembling old dog wrapped in a leather jacket. The dog wasn't moving much, just breathing, slow, ragged breaths that whistled out through gray whiskers. The man kept walking, past the front desk, past the receptionist calling a name, past the line of pet owners who turned to stare. He pushed through the door of exam room 3 and laid the dog down on the steel table like he was made of glass. Then his knees gave out. He didn't fall. He just bent forward, forehead pressed against the dog's ribcage, both hands gripping the worn leather jacket underneath. The big man started to shake. His name was Frank. The dog's name was Bandit. And what the vet noticed in the next 60 seconds would stop the entire procedure cold. Stay with me on this one. Frank had never cried in front of another human being in his life. Not once. He'd buried his wife 6 years earlier without making a sound. He'd buried his brother before that. He'd come home from a war when he was 19 and never once let his face crack. But he was crying now. Big silent tears rolling down into his gray beard, soaking into the patchwork of the leather jacket underneath his hands. The dog under that jacket was named Bandit. 13 years old. Half German Shepherd, half something else, something with a wider chest and a calmer eye. He had a black saddle on his back and a face that was almost completely white now. He'd had that face for the last 2 years. Frank had been driving since 5 in the morning. 3 hours. He'd skipped the closest vet on purpose. He didn't want to do this where everyone knew him. He didn't want the woman at the front desk to be the same woman who'd handed him a clipboard for 13 years of checkups. He wanted strangers. He wanted a quiet room. He wanted to do this clean. Believe me, there's no clean way to do this. The diagnosis had come 2 weeks earlier. Kidney failure. Advanced. There was a mass on the left side. When the dog stopped looking up when Frank walked in the room, it was time. When the dog whimpered in his sleep, it was time. All 3 things had happened in the last 4 days. So now here he was. 3 hours from home. In an exam room he'd never been in before. With a dog he'd had longer than most marriages last. The door opened. A woman in her early 30s walked in. Dark hair pulled back. White coat. Quiet eyes. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked over to the table and put her hand gently on Bandit's flank. With him for an hour. If you want to talk to him, talk to him. If you want me to leave for a while, I leave. Frank still couldn't speak. He just kept one hand on the dog's chest. He could feel the heart underneath. Slow, tired, but still there. Tell me about him, doctor, Reeves said. She pulled up a small stool. She sat down. She didn't pick up a clipboard. She didn't open a laptop. She just sat there. Frank cleared his throat. The first words came out cracked. He was a working dog, he said. Long time ago. Trained for scent work. They were testing dogs for medical detection. He was good at it, but he had a temperament problem. Didn't like crowds. Didn't like fluorescent lights. They were going to put him down because they couldn't place him. I took him. How long ago? 10 years. She nodded. She looked at the dog. The dog's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Frank. He hasn't taken his eyes off you, she said quietly. He doesn't, Frank said. There was a long silence in the room. The dog's breathing was the only sound. In and out. Slow whistling breaths. Frank reached up and tugged at the collar of his leather jacket. There was a small patch sewn into the inside lining. Hand-stitched. The letters were uneven, the work of someone who'd never sewed before. Bandit. My wife made that, he said. His voice broke for the first time. She did it the day after I brought him home. She wasn't a sewer. She wanted his name on the jacket because she said he was family now. Doctor. Reeves didn't say anything. She just nodded. She's gone too, Frank said. The dog made a sound. A small whine. Then he reached his head over and pressed his nose into Frank's stomach. Just rested it there. Like he was tired. Like he just wanted to be close. Frank put his hand on the dog's head and closed his eyes. It's time, he said. Doctor. Reeves stood up slowly. She walked over to a small steel cart that had been wheeled in earlier and pulled the cloth off it. 2 syringes sat there. The first was a sedative. The second was the one that would do it. She didn't pick them up yet. She turned back to Frank. What I'm going to do first, she said, is give him a sedative. He'll relax. He won't feel anything. He'll fall asleep on you with you holding him. Then, after a few minutes, I'll give him the second one. He won't know. He'll just go from sleep to gone. Frank nodded. He still had his hand on Bandit's head. Take all the time you want before I start, she said. He took it. He sat down on the stool and pulled the leather jacket up tighter around the dog. He talked to him. Quietly. Things only the two of them would understand. Names of places they'd been. The river up in Wyoming. The cabin in the Smokies. The motel in Tennessee, where Bandit had eaten a whole bag of jerky off the bed and then thrown up on the carpet. The dog's tail thumped once. Just once. Frank pressed his forehead against the top of the dog's head. Okay, he said. Okay, buddy. We're done. Doctor. Reeves picked up the first syringe. That's when Bandit moved. It wasn't a sudden movement. He didn't have the strength for sudden. But he gathered himself. He shifted his weight. He pulled himself forward across the steel table. His paws scrabbled weakly. And he pressed his nose against Frank's stomach. Hard. He held it there. Frank didn't even notice. He thought the dog was just leaning in for the last time. He wrapped his arms around him. He pressed his face into the dog's neck. But Doctor. Reeves noticed. She had stopped moving. The syringe was still in her hand. She was watching the dog's nose. She was watching the angle. She was watching the pressure. She was watching how Bandit's head was tilted, the way his eyes had gone half closed but his nostrils were flaring. She had seen this before. A long time ago. In a different building. On a different table. She had been a graduate student, and she had spent 6 months at a research lab where dogs were trained to detect ovarian cancer from blood samples. They'd had a Belgian Malinois named Buster who could pick the right beaker out of a row of 10. The way Buster pressed his nose against the glass when he had a hit looked exactly like what Bandit was doing right now. Doctor. Reeves set the syringe down. Frank was still talking to the dog. Quiet things. Goodbye things. She walked over slowly. She put her hand gently on Frank's shoulder. Sir, she said. He didn't look up. Sir. Those her words. Has anything been bothering you lately? Stomach. Side. Anything you've been ignoring? Frank stared at her. The grief in his face was starting to be replaced with something else. Confusion. A small sting of anger. My dog is on this table, he said. I know. My dog is dying right now. I know. What are you doing? She held his eyes for a second. Then she let her hand drop from his shoulder. She stepped back. And then she did something Frank wouldn't understand for another 10 minutes. She smiled gently. She shook her head, almost like she was scolding herself. She said, I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. Forgive me. Take your time. Whenever you're ready, we'll continue. She poured a small paper cup of water from a pitcher on the counter and pressed it into his free hand. Drink something, she said. Breathe. There's no rush. Frank took the cup. He drank. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. The room got quiet again. The dog breathed. The clock on the wall ticked. The fluorescent light hummed. She walked back over to the cart. She picked up the first syringe. Whenever you're ready, she said again. Her voice was soft. Frank looked down at Bandit. The dog was still pressed against his stomach. His eyes were closed now. His breathing was so slow. Now here's the thing you need to understand. Frank had spent the entire morning preparing himself for this exact moment. He had rehearsed the words in his head. He had told himself in the truck, on the highway, in the parking lot, that he would not flinch when the time came. That he owed the dog a clean exit. That the dog had earned a peaceful one. So when the vet said, whenever you're ready, Frank closed his eyes, and he gave the smallest nod he had ever given in his life. Do it, he whispered. Doctor. Reeves moved the syringe toward the dog's leg. Frank held Bandit tight. The room held its breath. And just for a second, just for one fraction of a second, everything was still. Bandit lunged. It shouldn't have been possible. The dog had barely moved in 2 days. He'd been so weak Frank had carried him from the truck to the door to the table. But somehow, in that 1 second between the syringe approaching and the needle touching skin, he summoned something. He pushed off with his back legs. He drove his entire head and chest into Frank's stomach. And he held there, pressed against him, growling, a low, rumbling, broken sound. Then he collapsed. His head fell sideways. His tongue went limp. But his nose was still pointed at Frank's stomach. Frank made a sound that wasn't a word. Doctor. Reeves dropped the syringe back onto the cart. It clattered against the steel. She didn't pick it up. Sir, I need you to listen to me right now. Frank wasn't listening. He was bent over the dog. He was checking him. The dog was still breathing. Barely. Fast and shallow. He's not gone, doctor. Reeves said. He's still with us. But sir, listen to me, please. Your dog is trying to tell you something. He has been trying to tell you something. And I think I know what it is. Frank turned his head. His eyes were wild now. What are you talking about? You said he was trained for medical detection. They washed him out. Doesn't matter. The training stays. Once a dog has learned a target scent, he the growl. He's been signaling. Probably for a long time. Frank stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't know. Signaling what? She paused. Then she said it. That something is wrong with you. Inside you. I think your dog has been smelling something on you that shouldn't be there. Frank let out a short, hard laugh. The laugh of a man with nothing left to give. Lady, I came here to put my dog down. I did not come here for some kind of magic show. He's leaning on me because he loves me. Sir, he just used what might be the last strength in his body to do that. 3 times. Same spot. That landed. Frank looked down at Bandit. The dog's nose. The angle. The fact that, even unconscious, his head was still aimed at Frank's stomach. That's just where my hand is, Frank said. Your hand has been on his head. Not on your stomach. The two of them were silent. Doctor, Reeves spoke very quietly now. I'm asking you for 10 minutes. Let me examine you. Just feel. No tests yet. No needles. Just my hands. If I find nothing, you and I finish what you came here to do. I will not stop you. I will not delay. I promise. Frank's jaw worked. He looked at the dog. The dog wasn't moving anymore, but his nostrils were still pulling air. Slow. Determined. 10 minutes, Frank said. He stood up. She had him lift his shirt. He was a big man. Thick through the middle, the way old bikers get. She moved her fingers methodically along his abdomen. Right side. Center. Left side. Lower. She stopped. She pressed again. Slower. Deeper. She looked up at his face. Sir, she said. Frank looked down. What? I want you to feel this. Press right where my fingers are. He pressed. His brow knit. There was something there. Hard. About the size of a walnut. He'd never noticed it before. He didn't go feeling around his own stomach. He hadn't in years. His shirts hid his belly. His belt did the rest. The thing was just sitting there. Solid. Wrong. He stepped backward and almost knocked over the stool. What is that? He said. It wasn't a question. It was the sound a man makes when something he didn't know was true is suddenly true. I don't know yet, doctor. Reeves said. I'm a vet. I cannot diagnose you. But I have a friend who is an internist at the hospital 20 minutes from here. I'm going to call him. Right now. Today. He will see you today. Frank just stood there with his shirt up and his free hand still resting on it. And the dog, he said. She looked at Bandit. She looked at his color. She looked at his gums. She lifted his eyelid. Sir, she said. Your dog is sick. He is very sick. But I'm going to be honest with you. He looks worse than he is. He looks like a dog with end-stage organ failure, but the way he just moved. That isn't end-stage. End-stage dogs don't lunge. End-stage dogs don't alert. I want to do my own blood work. I want to put him on fluids. I want 24 hours. 24 hours, Frank repeated. That's all I'm asking. Frank looked at Bandit on the table. He looked at the syringe on the cart. He looked at the leather jacket bunched up under the dog's body, with his wife's hand-stitched letters facing up at the ceiling. Okay, he said. If you're still with me on this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more coming, and I want you here for the part nobody saw coming. Frank signed papers he didn't read. Doctor. Reeves made 2 phone calls. Within 10 minutes, a vet tech was rolling a quiet IV pole into the room, and Bandit was getting fluids. Within 30 minutes, Frank was in his truck driving to a hospital he had never heard of, with the address scribbled on the back of a business card, with a hand he couldn't keep steady on the wheel. He kept reaching down to where the dog usually rode. The seat was empty. He kept reaching anyway. And the whole time in the back of his mind, one thought kept circling. The dog knew. The dog had known the whole time. The hospital was small. One of those community places with a gravel parking lot and a single nurse at the front desk. Dr. Reeves's friend met him in the waiting area. His name was Dr. Ahmed. He was older than Frank had expected. Bald. Quiet. He shook Frank's hand and didn't make small talk. Within an hour, they had him on a CT table. Within 2 hours, Dr. Ahmed was sitting across from him in a small office. "It's a tumor, Dr. Ahmed said. He didn't soften it. He didn't pat it. Frank appreciated that. "It's in your pancreas. About 2.5 centimeters. The good news, and I want you to hear me on this, the good news is that it's small. It hasn't spread to lymph nodes. We caught this very, very early. This is the kind of pancreatic tumor that 10 times out of 100 is operable. And yours is operable. You are in that 10%. Frank stared at him. "How?" he said. "How is this even? I don't have any symptoms." That is exactly why pancreatic cancer kills so many people. By the time most people have symptoms, it is too late. Yours has not given you any symptoms yet. And someone somehow found it before it did. Dr. Ahmed leaned forward. "How was it found, Mr. Donnelly?" Frank told him. The whole story. The dog on the table. The syringe. The lunge. The vet feeling his stomach. Dr. Ahmed listened all the way through. When Frank was done, the doctor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I have read about dogs detecting cancer. I never thought I would meet a man whose life was saved by one. I think I would like to meet your dog when he is feeling better." Frank started laughing. It was a strange sound. Half laugh, half sob. He couldn't stop. He laughed until he was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and the room was blurring around him. When he was done, Dr. Ahmed handed him a tissue and said, "Now, let's talk about the surgery." They scheduled it for 10 days out. Frank drove back to the vet office that night. It was nearly 7 by the time he pulled in. The lights in the front were off, but the back office had a glow. Dr. Reeves was waiting for him. She walked him to a back recovery room. There were 4 kennels. 3 were empty. The 4th had a small mat, a water bowl, and a German Shepherd mix lying on his side with an IV line running into his front leg. Bandit looked up. Frank dropped onto his knees on the linoleum. He didn't even feel the impact. He just dropped. The dog lifted his head. He thumped his tail. Once, twice, 3 times. He was alive. He was looking at Frank. Frank pressed his face into the side of the dog's neck and didn't lift it for a long time. When he finally did, Dr. Reeves was sitting on the floor across from him. She had her back against the wall. She was holding a clipboard, and she had taken off her white coat. She looked tired. "His blood work came back," she said quietly. "It is not what was on the original report. His kidney values are bad, but they're not catastrophic. He has a urinary tract infection on top of his chronic disease. The infection has been making him miserable. That's why he stopped eating. That's why he stopped moving. We can treat the infection. The chronic kidney disease we manage. With diet, with fluids, with monitoring, dogs his size with his numbers can have months. Sometimes a year or more." Frank swallowed. He couldn't quite trust his voice. "But I was told. I know what you were told. I'm not blaming the other vet. The numbers were bad. The mass on his side, by the way, is not a tumor. It is a cyst. We can drain it. It's been pressing on his belly. Once it is drained, he will eat again. I would bet on it. Frank put his hand on Bandit's chest. He could feel the heart now. Stronger than this morning. Not strong, but stronger. And me, he said. Tell me. He told her about the pancreas. The tumor. The small size. The surgery in 10 days. Doctor. Reeves closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked at Bandit. He's been telling you for a while, hasn't he? She said. Frank thought about it. Really thought. He started lying with his head on my stomach about 6 months ago, he said. All the time. I thought he was just getting old. Wanting to be close. He'd lie there for hours. 6 months ago, that tumor was probably a centimeter. Maybe less. He smelled it then. Frank looked down at the dog. You damn old soldier, he said. The dog's tail thumped once. Doctor. Reeves stood up slowly. She put her hand on Frank's shoulder, the same way she had hours earlier. But it was different now. He is going to need treatment. So are you. Both of you are going to be tired. Look, buddy, he said. She'd be real proud of you right now. The dog nosed the patch. His nostrils flared. And very slowly, his tail thumped again. 6 months passed. Frank's surgery had gone the way Dr. Ahmed said it would. They took the tumor and a portion of his pancreas with it. He lost weight. He was tired for a long time. He had to learn to eat differently. He had to take pills. He had to come back for scans every 3 months for a while. The first scan was clean. The second scan was clean. And then they started talking about him like a man who was probably going to live a long time. Bandit had a slower road. The cyst was drained and it didn't come back. The infection cleared in 2 weeks. The chronic kidney disease they managed with a special diet and subcutaneous fluids that Frank learned how to give at home, twice a week, sitting on the kitchen floor with the dog half asleep in his lap. The first time he stuck the needle, and he was so nervous he was sweating. Bandit didn't even flinch. The dog had been through a lot worse than that. By the 3rd month, Bandit was eating again. Real meals. He'd lost a lot of weight that he didn't get back. He nearly fell over. There were hard days, too. Some mornings Bandit didn't want to get up. Some mornings Frank didn't either. They had appointments, and they had bad blood work, and they had setbacks. There was one week where the dog wouldn't eat, and Frank thought he was about to lose him after all. The dog rallied. Of course he did. That was Bandit. Frank made some other changes, too. He picked up the phone one evening 3 months in, and he called his son. His son was in Oregon. They hadn't spoken in 4 years. Frank couldn't even remember exactly what the fight had been about. Something stupid. Something about the funeral. Something about money. None of it mattered now. The phone rang 4 times before his son answered. Frank said, "Son, it's your dad." There was a long silence. Then his son said, "Dad." Frank told him about the dog. He told him about the cancer. He told him, voice cracking, that he wasn't ready to die without saying he was sorry. His son flew out the next month. He brought his 2 daughters. Frank had never met them. He sat on his porch in the early evening with Bandit at his feet, and he listened to 2 little girls argue about which one of them got to brush the dog's tail next. Both of his granddaughters got tired of arguing eventually and just sat on the floor of the porch, one on each side of the old dog, and brushed him together. Bandit lay there with his eyes closed. His tail thumped occasionally. The leather jacket was draped over his hindquarters as a blanket. The patch with his name on it, hand-stitched in uneven letters, was right there on the outside where everybody could see it. Frank watched all of this and did not say a word. The vet, Dr. Reeves, kept in touch. She'd send a text every couple of weeks. She came out to see Bandit twice. She told Frank, the second time she visited, that she'd written up Bandit's case and presented it at a small conference. Said he was famous now in certain circles. Said there were a couple of researchers who wanted to meet him. Frank told her if they wanted to come out and shake the dog's paw, they could come right ahead. But they were going to have to wait their turn. The granddaughters had dibs. She laughed. On the morning of what would have been the day, 6 months exactly, Frank walked Bandit down to the end of the driveway. It was a slow walk. The dog had his good days and his bad days. This was a good day. They stopped at the mailbox. Frank knelt down, the way he had to most mornings now. He put his hand on Bandit's head. The dog leaned into him. Slowly, comfortably, the way old dogs do when they trust you with their entire weight. Frank looked at him. "You know what today is," he said. The dog's tail thumped. 6 months ago, I was going to put you down. 6 months ago, I was going to walk into that office, lay you on a table, and watch you go. And you wouldn't let me. You old, mean, stubborn, beautiful son of a gun. You wouldn't let me. He pressed his forehead against the top of the dog's head. The way he had that morning. I came in there to save you, he whispered. And you saved me. The dog made a soft sound. Just a hum in his throat. Frank stayed there for a minute. Just like that. Forehead to forehead. Then he stood up. He put his hand on the small of Bandit's back, gentle, steadying. They walked slowly back up the driveway together. He didn't have his knees give out this time. He didn't have to be carried. Neither did the dog. He had it backwards. He'd had it backwards from the beginning. And the dog, the way dogs do, never once held it against him.